Hi there, everyone. My name is Forrest, and today I'm going to be talking to you about some of the current news going on posted in the Alphagrad news channel. Now, this one's going to be a little bit smaller and shorter of a segment. The main reason for that is due to some of the news that's coming out, wanting to make sure it's grouped appropriately and being able to really talk about what's important, what's not, and what might build some valuable skills. So, as we do so, let's dive right in. So, again, this is the current awareness based on the articles being posted in the Alphagrad News channel there in Discord. So, very high level. Uh, if you've been watching the series, you probably have heard this spiel, but who am I? Well, I'm Forrest, and I am a cybersecurity professional. I've been both an individual contributor and a leader for cybersecurity. I'm currently getting my doctoral of science in cybersecurity, which is part of the reason why we're doing these videos in the first place. I hold my master's of science in cybersecurity and information security, information assurance. I have 15 plus industry standard certifications related to technology and cybersecurity. I've had multiple fields now working in the field, and I'm also an industry researcher. So that's the main reason I'm talking to you about this today, because I'm really a nerd about all of this stuff whenever it comes down to it. So let's dive right into the first one here. So this is again an article, Cisco can't stop using hard-coded passwords. Now this is an article, we'll go ahead and pivot over there, by Bruce Schneider on security there. And specifically, this one is a blog post he made about one of the newest Cisco vulnerabilities in its emergency responder product. So personally, I wasn't intimately familiar with this, so I started researching a bit. So what I was able to do is start looking up the Cisco emergency responder. So first I went to this page of what the vulnerability actually was. Bruce does link that in his blog post. But then I also did a little bit more of understanding. Now, what we're going to focus on before getting into the article specifically is just some high levels. So let's go back to that slideshow. So, in this, part of the reason for this article is really to start showing how CVEs tend to be reported and what's important to look for and understand as a cybersecurity professional. Now, one of the first things you're probably already thinking, and you can always go back to it, is, oh my gosh, that's a giant red circle of death. It says 10 out of 10. It's critical. Oh my gosh, what's happening, right? The reason I wanted to go ahead and show you those pages first and foremost is let's talk specifically about what has the vulnerability. And that is a component of Cisco Unified Communications Manager, and it's a even smaller subset, a component of an emergency responder. So essentially, it's something that helps those emergency services, be it paramedics, fire departments, so on and so forth, really rein that in. So one thing you should already be looking for: am I impacted? Does my organization even use it? If the answer is no, well then you need to also say, well, do any of our vendors use it? And is this an impact for them? And if that answer is no, well, guess what? That critical vulnerability is no longer a concern for you. And you can move on. You, as a cybersecurity professional, want to be able to really demonstrate this skill to not only your peers, but to senior leadership as that trusted subject matter expert. Now, if that answer is yes, though, you do use it, right? Well, hope it's not all lost, right? What exactly is the impact? You want to be able to define, how is it being accessed? How is it used? Is there anything that we need to be concerned about? For instance, if the only way that you have had this component set up is that you have to have a specific IP and you also have to have a hardware token, something like that, to access it, well, then it's not really as big of an impact as it sounds immediately. So again, you have to be a very conscious, critical thinker whenever you start to see these articles. I will kind of mention, I think Bruce is awesome with this, but it's very much a fear mongering if you do not understand what exactly he's talking about. And that's not his intent either, but that is something we, as trusted subject matter experts, have to be aware of. Now, I went on my soapbox a little bit there, but the main reason is, again, getting you familiar with it. I'll provide links to this in the description below, but please definitely just take the time, think about it, think about how you, in a scenario, would react to something like this. One last thing I'll say, to Bruce's credit, this is not the first time Cisco's been hit with hard-coding passwords. This was actually all over the news a while back for a completely different vulnerability. So they have a little bit of cleanup to do there. Now, what could happen? The reason I say could, it hasn't been determined if it's actually in the wild yet. But what could happen is that the vulnerability on the unpatched system of the emergency responder could go ahead and essentially allow a remote attacker or even a local attacker to go ahead and get into the system and can potentially conduct nefarious commands, being able to run at the highest level of permissions of root there. So it is very dangerous and it can result in a full takeover of the device. But you as a cybersecurity professional or subject matter expert want to make sure that you're advocating that to your business of, are we actually impacted? Essentially doing an impact analysis there. Now, what some future implications this may be is that this really came from that internal discovery at Cisco, right? Since then, software was released to remediate it for any of the customers there, but there's really still some questions as to if this has actually been exploited in the wild. So far, there's no reports, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. Additionally, the currently big unknown is if there are other vulnerabilities that might be directly or indirectly tied into this one that might either now be easier to exploit or potentially harder to exploit. So remains to be seen, but definitely just keep an eye out for anything that really comes across as a critical vulnerability, so that way you can assess it. Moving on to the next article here. We have Phishers spoof USPS and 12 other national postal services. Say that 3 times fast. Now, we're not talking about fishermen or anything else like that, but we're talking about actual phishing attempts, those bad actors. So let's go ahead and go right to the article. And in this article, this is coming from Krebs on Security. Again, Brian Krebs, fantastic security researcher, and really gets a lot of technical details and things that honestly a lot of security folks will read and look for and sometimes take credit for of being thought leaders, right? Now, the biggest thing that Krebs really wanted to go ahead and mention on this is, well, there's an uptick of these attacks. It's not something that's brand new, right? But this is now a bigger uptick to where we're seeing this more and more throughout the industry. So let me go back to the slideshow. Again, I'll provide the link to this in the description so you can do your own research. But some very high-level pieces of information. So again, with these types of attacks, they're being cast really with a wide net. This really isn't generally set up to say, I want to really fish forest, right? This is being set up to say it's not a matter of who, but how many will interact. And that's a very easy exploit vector because at the end of the day, you're targeting the public. You're not targeting a company. You're not targeting anything else. You're just targeting anybody. And with this, global carriers across the world are really being impacted. USPS is one of the most prominent ones just because of its wide-scale scope, but these are also being done with any Australian, Ireland, Spain, Italy, Mexico, and many other countries to attempt to have an international impact impersonating those national postal services. So let's talk about the very, very high level. What is actually happening? So individuals are receiving these fraudulent USPS SMS, basically those text attempts there. In this, the messages will often inform that there was a package attempted to be delivered, but it failed due to some specific reason. We've seen a ton of these be based around, hey, it failed because we don't have your right address. What it then informs you to do, click on the link to update your address information or whatever specifically is said there. Now, some reports are also stating that these links are behind Cloudflare, basically a huge web hosting thing. That can be a whole conversation itself, but it's behind a Cloudflare that's requiring it to be activated to redirect to the phishing page. However, if it's not activated, they route to the legitimate sites, so that legitimate USPS, right? As well, there are some reports of just typo squatting attempts in which the domain name is slightly different. So where we might be talking about USPS, it might be USSP or something like that, right? So those typo squatting attempts really trying to just let human error do the work for them. In addition with this, from some of the websites reported as phishing, it was captured that the data that's being inputted into these forms will be processed and sent to a Telegram user through an automated bot. The Telegram user attempts to really capitalize on this because they're actually selling customized source code to really optimize the phishing pages. So they're using this as a way to try to continue to improve their own nefarious code. Now, what does this mean for the future? There's a lot of implications by this, right? Like I mentioned immediately whenever we started talking about this, this isn't a new type of attack. This is something that's been ongoing. And what's concerning is that this is an increasing pattern type, that these bad actors are really starting to figure out they can make additional profit, and almost guaranteed profit, by offering to really sell nefarious source code or sell attacks or anything else like that, really allowing for this unskilled bad actor to still be nefarious, but also be responsible for further exploits, right? Because now it's someone else's idea. Hey, I hate this company. I want them to go down. Somebody can go out and purchase an attack, a DDoS, a distributed denial of service, right? That person might not be able to conduct it themselves, but they can pay somebody who can. And really what this begs the question at is how each country around the globe is addressing cybersecurity awareness among its population, right? In the US, there are some pushes, both at the executive and the congressional level. And in China, for instance, right? China declared cybersecurity as a national priority. The issue is, it was very easy previously for cybersecurity professionals to say, well, you just really have to be worried about the aging population, right? They're not good with computers. They didn't grow up with computers. And unfortunately, that's been proven wrong. Studies have recently come out that's really reaffirming the idea of Gen Z really being as vulnerable, if not more, than older generations. And really that causes this approach to have to be redefined in how the most effective cybersecurity awareness training can be delivered. So, in that, again, I'll go ahead and provide the links to these stories so you can go ahead and do this research on your own. Don't just take what I say at face value. But again, thank you all for taking the time. This was a great presentation and opportunity to work with Alphagrad and be able to present some on the news sources that they have posted. Anyway, this is Forrest, and thank you again. Take care. Bye-bye.